Hi, it's Erin. Let's talk a little bit about stock photography again. I often get questions about the difference between editorial and commercial images, and I'm often asked to explain a little bit more about what all of that means and give some examples. So that is exactly what I'm going to do today. So basically, the difference between commercial and editorial images is how the person who licenses them can use them. Okay. Commercial images, as the name suggests, can be used for commercial purposes. Editorial images generally cannot. So let's get into some details of this just to give you a little bit more information. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so what I'm going to share now is from Shutterstock, and this is information that anyone can go onto their site and get. But it says editorial use is generally defined as use made for descriptive or illustrative purposes in a newsworthy context or of human interest. On Shutterstock, such content is labeled as editorial use only, and it is not cleared for commercial use. So, some ways that these images might be used. Okay. Editorial images, they use them in things like nonfiction books and documentaries and news articles, blog articles, things like that. They would not be able to be used for things like, you know, commercial things on product packages. Okay. Anyone doing like social media campaigns or any other types of advertising that would not be allowed. So, those are just a couple of the general things about what can and can't be done with these photos. Okay, so let's give you some examples of. I'm going to give you some examples of actual photos that are in my portfolios. Okay, so let's take a look at my account on iStock. Okay, and we're just going to scroll through these. Now, a lot of the photos that you're seeing right off the bat here are editorial images. Let's take this one for example. Okay, this is just a very generic photo of cars on the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey. What makes this editorial? Well, anytime there's any visible logos, trademarks, any identifiers, recognizable people now and here, even though we know there's people all in these cars and everything, clearly they are not recognizable. But what is recognizable? The logos on these cars, okay? The license plates on these cars, the Easy Pass logo. Okay, so all of this type of thing would make that editorial. Now, if it didn't have any signs in the picture and it was just some cars, and maybe we took out the logos on the cars and we took out the license plates, and there was nothing really distinguishable about that kind of signal that it was a brand. Listen, we can look at the backs of a lot of these cars and know what they are, even if they didn't have like the emblem or the logo on them or whatnot. But things like that, unless it was like an absolute, like, I don't know, trademarked like design or something. Like, for instance, if you had like a cyber truck in there, like I would not try to sell that as commercial because everybody clearly knows what that is. But if you have sedans, SUVs, and you remove these elements from them, you could try to submit them as commercial, and they may be approved. But in general, for scenes like this is going to be editorial. Now, this type of editorial may also be accepted by a place like Adobe Stock. Adobe Stock does accept editorial images, but they only accept them on the basis of what's generally called illustrative editorial. And basically, they will not allow any recognizable people in them. So it has to kind of like illustrate like a brand or something like that. So, for instance, if I had a close up of that Easy Pass sign, that would be something that would probably be considered illustrative editorial for Adobe purposes. Let's check out some more. And this is a photograph I took of a United jet getting ready to land. Clearly, we have the art on the tail wing of this plane. We have the United symbol on it. There might even be something with that color scheme that's proprietary. I don't know, but this in general is going to be an illustrative editorial image. Okay, if I could zoom in real close and see that pilot in there, okay, then maybe it wouldn't be illustrative, but we cannot do that, obviously. So here is one of my baseball card images. These I submit obviously as editorial because we have recognizable faces and names and everything in there. These something like this, Adobe would not accept because of the faces, and some other sites might not accept this anymore either. Stuff that they took years ago, places are getting a little bit more. They're getting a little bit more strict with what they accept. But years ago, when I submitted this particular image and this series of images, they went down as editorial. Okay, and they actually do rather well. So this one right here, this is of the Light Hook in Sandy Hook, New Jersey. This one, let's see, I don't even think, no, this is actually not an editorial image. This is a considered a commercial image. And the reason I believe why they accepted that as commercial is because this is like a historic building in a national park. Okay. I guess you could go along the lines of it's kind of like everybody's property, right? Okay, it's government property. Things like that, depending can often be sold as commercial. And this one was accepted as a commercial image. Now, most of these stock agencies, if you try to submit something as commercial, when they review it, it's going to get knocked down. Okay, it's going to get you might get feedback that says must submit as editorial or something like that. But I think this is where it can get kind of tricky for people because you think, well, here's this building, but yet if you were taking a building picture of like a storefront or something somewhere else, that would be editorial. So yeah, I understand how this can get a little bit confusing. Okay, but for instance, pictures like even like the Statue of Liberty, okay, we all know what that is. That's in like a national park, right? Even though little island, still a national park, right? Or national property at the very least. And that image, you can sell an image of that, you can sell a photo or an image of that statue, and you can do that commercially. Okay, so that's kind of along the lines that places like this government-owned lighthouse would fall into, if that makes sense. I was asked specifically in what led up to this video questions about taking photos at universities. Now, this is a photo that was taken at Rutgers University on one of their campuses. And specifically, like I almost always label these as editorial with the proper caption, the location, the town, the state, the date, all of that, and a description of what it is or what's going on. If I were to say, if I had gone up to this building and I had taken like a close-up picture of like one of those pretty windows that's in there, or maybe like the very top of like the clock tower or something like that, and it kind of became like a photo that was of generic architecture, okay, then that type of image I could probably almost definitely sell commercially. But because I'm taking a photo of the whole entire thing and it is the Waxman Institute, then it becomes editorial. Now, there's some situations, like I said before, where we're dealing with like the lighthouse or the Statue of Liberty, where those can actually be sold as commercial. But in situations like this, where I'm dealing with college campuses and whatnot, I don't take that chance. I just put them as editorial. Okay. If someone really, really wanted to use this image in a commercial fashion at some point, they could always reach out to the stock agency. They could always reach out to the university and their legal department and do it that way. Okay. We don't always need to get involved in that as stock photographers. We want to protect ourselves and make sure to the best that we're able to make sure that people are using our photos appropriately. So, granted, a lot of that responsibility is on the stock agency, but you still want to be careful, especially if you're submitting to agencies like Alamy, where they don't really review the images per se. They're just going off of okay, did this image pass our technical qualifications? Boom, it's online, right? That's where you got to be careful because you could upload it everything as commercial, even if it's not, and it's not going to be caught. And then if someone uses your photo inappropriately and something happens and it comes back to you, that's not good, right? So those are always things to keep in mind. Um, Vintage Cabbage Patch doll. This is one that I always laugh about on here because it does sell, and it is a really crappy photo. Okay, it was taken with a 110 film camera by by little old 9-year old me or 10-year old me, whatever it was back then, and it does sell, and it is obviously editorial because we're dealing with Cabbage Patch Kids, and I think everybody understands that that is a big brand. Even I think they even sell them now, but it's a big brand type of toy situation. So yeah, that's 100% editorial. Okay, what about this one? We have this cruise ship, and I actually knew from other photos around it that it was a Golden Princess, that it was Princess Cruise Lines, the Golden Princess cruise ship. And you have these crew members standing here. They're getting ready to leave port, whatever. So are we, I think. That's how I got the photo. And so we're dealing with people in this photo. They're recognizable. I don't know who they are, but if you showed this photo around the world, sooner or later, someone would know who they are, right? That is this photo right here is definitely editorial from my standpoint because I don't know who they are. Was it taken in public? Yeah, it was. I could have, depending on where I was standing, um, out in where was this in St. Thomas, I could have been standing on the shoreline with my zoom lens. I could have taken that picture potentially. And let's say that I knew these guys, and I don't know, I don't think that I see anything like outwardly recognizable on their uniforms. They just look like your standard, cruise ship type uniform, whatever. Um, let's say I knew them and I got them each to sign a model release. Okay, there's nothing recognizable on there that I see right now that says Princess Cruise Lines on it. Okay. And let's say even if there was something, maybe in like one of the corners of the ship, and I had a model release for that image from those guys, and I photoshopped out like the little emblem that was like in the corner of this photo or whatnot, could I then sell it as commercial? Most likely, yeah. Might it get flagged by one of the agencies? It's possible, but those are the little types of things that things that you can do when you're looking for stuff like this. Now, is it realistic that you're going to get model releases from these crew members? No, I don't know who they are. Unless you're somebody that works on the ship and you're taking the photo, that's different. Okay. And I'm sure there are people working for these cruise ships or whatever that might do stock photography and are able to do stuff like that, but that was not me. So, stuff like this is just very easily just going to be editorial. Okay. And it does sell. This particular image does sell. Okay. Here is an interesting one. This is a photo that I took, oh my gosh, I uploaded it in 2014. So it was taken, maybe 2012, 2013, 2014, something like that. But here we go. We have this abandoned house here, or what looks to be an abandoned house, or it's not kept up at the very least. I don't know if someone lives there, but it looks abandoned. This I sell commercially. Now, there's nothing really that stands out about this house that says, oh, this is this particular historic property owned by so and so or whatever. It just looks like your kind of run of the mill, um, you know, abandoned colonial homes. So this one they do allow to be sold as an editorial image. There's nothing in there that indicates where it was taken. There's no like markers on it that indicate the address or anything like that. So in situations like these, generic architecture, okay, and I even have it tagged abandoned colonial style home. A colonial style home house is overgrown with weeds and shrubs, looks to be abandoned. Okay. And that's where you get into these situations where even though that's private property, most likely, these are the types of things that you can actually sell commercially. Now, I know that this gets so confusing at times, but basically, only in situations like that. If you have like very clearly recognizable people and you can't get property releases or not, and you can't get, I'm sorry, and you can't get model releases and it's taken in a public place. it's automatically going to be editorial. If you have like brands and logos and trademarks on things, they're going to be editorial. Here is one that I took outside at, what was this? This was Princeton University. Okay. And we can see people walking around. It's actually my daughter in the one side of it. But then you can see this one girl that's walking. Clearly, someone may be able to recognize her. But Princeton actually does allow editorial images to be taken on the exterior of their campus. Okay. So that is where this was taken. It's an area that's open to the public to walk through, even though it's a private university. And I have a lot of images like this in my collection. And of course, it's going to be editorial. Now, here is an image that I took down at Sandy Hook, New Jersey. You can see the twin lights. These are the lighthouses that are up here on this hill or on this mountain. And if those people weren't on the beach, I could almost certainly sell that image as commercial. I'm not sure. I would have to zoom in and see because this one structure that's across the water, that I think that's a restaurant. I can't see all the details. That might actually have the restaurant name in it, in which case I would like be cautious and I would sell it as editorial. But if that wasn't there and all we had were these houses along the shoreline and no people on the beach, then that could be used as editorial. But there are these people on the beach, and I guarantee you, if I were to zoom in on this really close, you could start to recognize them. So therefore, that would still be an editorial image. A bunch of motorcyclists or bikers, whatever you want to call it. This was at a public motorcycle rally that I was at in a public park. So yes, can we recognize license plates and logos and possibly even people? Yes, yes, yes. But it was a public event. It was taken in a place where anybody could go. It's not a ticketed event. You could just go there and watch it. So therefore, that can be used as editorial. Okay. I'm not going to be getting property releases from all these people and property releases for, maybe the Harleys or whatever other logos and stuff we can see in the photo. So that is editorial. And then I actually see myself taking the photo in this mirror in the corner. I just noticed because I was on the back of that bike. Okay. Let me see if there's any that might be a little confusing. Okay, here's a good example of like a purely illustrative editorial image. This is something that Adobe would almost certainly take as editorial. There are no people in it or anything. It's just Corona beer bottles on display on my deck that I photographed it. That I had photographed. So that would be illustrative editorial. Again, it's a brand. So any photos of anything having to do with brands will be editorial. This one right here, interesting photo. Okay. This is of a bicycle race. Now, I know where this is, but here's an interesting thing. Because I did a long exposure or a timed exposure of these cyclists in this race, you cannot make out who they are. You cannot make out the logos on their biking costumes, biking uniforms, whatever. You can't really make anything out. Even the signs that are in the background are like your generic no parking signs, generic handicap parking signs, things like that. So there's really nothing here that screams, hey, I recognize that person or I recognize that property or whatever. This is actually a commercial image. This one I think is going to be an easy one. This old Kodak 134 Instamatic camera. I mean, look, we have a Kodak logo on it. So this is editorial. And you can see even where iStock put editorial use only. Best Buy sign, editorial, obviously. Okay, here. I took all of these photos of these doors in a downtown area. I'm not going to say where it was because it really doesn't matter, because unless you've specifically been to this area, And even if you have, you might not recognize that these are doors from this particular downtown area that I was at. So, my point in that is that these photos, even though it's of the exterior of a building on a public street where there were stores and stuff around, this kind of becomes like this generic architecture picture where like this pretty door and this pretty building are decorated for Christmas. So this is actually being sold on iStock and many other stock sites as a commercial image. Okay, this is the front of somebody's house. I thought it was like a really, really cool Halloween display. I took a photo of it. Now, even if I couldn't recognize where it was, someone might be able to because that's very distinct the way they have the signs hanging up and all this stuff that's going on in this really beautiful home. So that I put down as editorial. And even if you thought you could get away with selling it commercial, this is stuff that I don't mess around with. When I'm dealing with people's homes where they're homes where it's very clear that people are living in them, yes, it's visible from the street and anybody can walk up on the sidewalk or drive by in a car and take a photo, completely legal, but I'm not going to sell somebody's property like that as commercial. Okay. So that is editorial. Okay. Another one of a lighthouse. This is the Great Beds Light that's in the Raritan Bay in New Jersey. I believe that the lighthouse privately owned now? I think that it actually is, but it's kind of like just this landmark that's in the middle of the water here. You can see there's a barge out here behind it. It's probably like anchored in the water. But this one is actually allowed to be sold as commercial. There's nothing else in there that indicates that it's editorial. You can't see any pictures. There's no boats going by with the markings on them or anything like that. Anything with storefronts. Okay, this one I took in Manhattan back in 2013. It's an Andy Warhol display um, at a store in Manhattan. This very, very clearly is editorial. Okay, we're dealing with brands. Um, Okay, even though it's a public place and those are not real people, they're mannequins, we still have the markings of different brands there. Okay, here is one where there was a kiteboarder in the bay. And although he's quite a distance from me, I'm using a long lens to get this image. When you zoom in, and even I knew when I zoomed in, when I was reviewing these photos and doing any like lighting tweaks and whatnot, that you can see this guy's face. Okay, so this image is an editorial image. Now, let's say it was kind of like his back that was to us. There was no recognizable logos or anything. His head was turned so you couldn't see his face. Yeah, I would potentially use that as commercial. And in fact, I have similar photos like that of surfers where they're in just like plain black wetsuits. You can't see any markings on the board just because of the way they're positioned. You cannot see their faces, or maybe the wave is in front of them, so you can't recognize them. Yeah, I use that stuff as commercial all the time. But once you're able to see that face, even if you have to zoom in to do it, it becomes editorial. What do we think about this image? Because this is something that I haven't really touched on before, but for a brief while, I was doing dog photography. Now, this is somebody's dog. It's a friend of mine. It was their dog. What do you think? Do you think that I need some sort of a release to sell that image of that dog? It might surprise you that no, I don't, because animals in general they do not have rights as far as photos go. Now, let's say that this was one of these like really famous, like I don't know. Do you remember Boo, like that little dog or something like that? That might be different. Let's say that I'm out and about and Boo's making a public appearance and I have photos of Boo at like the Boo book signing or whatever it might be. That is different, but I'm talking about just in general animals. You're taking the photo of them. There's no people in this. You can't even tell where this was taken. Okay. All you can basically tell is, hey, it's a dog, and hey, it looks like a German short haired pointer. Okay. Stuff like that. You actually don't need releases. Okay. So this is an image of Blair Hall at Princeton University. And although we could say, hey, this isn't an overall photo of this structure, pretty much like most people, unless they've been there and they specifically know this building, they're not going to know that it's Blair Hall, right? So stuff like that, maybe you could get away with doing commercial, but when it comes to stuff like this with like a private university and yeah, that's probably some common architecture that we see in this. I just don't take the chance with stuff like that. So this one is being sold as editorial. Here is an image. This is was taken at it's one of the batteries at Fort Wadsworth. It's on Staten Island. Now, this is kind of in that same realm as like the lighthouse that I took on Sandy Hook, that photo of the big white tower, the lighthouse and the lighthouse keepers house that's connected to it. This is it's federal land. Okay. These are like historic structures. There's nothing in there. There's no boats going by that have any markings on them, no cruise ships coming under the bridge or anything over there. So, this type of image, this one right here, no people, this is actually commercial. Okay, here's one again, another lighthouse. This was the Barnegat Light in New Jersey. And although, I don't know, if I zoomed in, you know what? Yeah, actually, because this is a high resolution image. You have a guy that looks like he's fishing over here. You have two people walking. You have this boat going by. If these people were not in this picture, I could probably get away with selling it commercially. Let's say that there was a little marking on that boat. I could probably like Photoshop it out, whatever, and it would be perfectly okay to sell commercially. But because there's people in here, no, I uploaded it as editorial. I do not know. Would they have rejected it if I put it through as commercial? iStock, probably. And we have photos of seals. Seals don't have to sign photo releases. Um, This is getting into a lot of wildlife stuff here. What do I love about shooting wildlife? I don't need to get model releases or anything from any of these animals. It's absolutely fantastic. This is an image that I took of an aircraft carrier coming up the Hudson during Fleet Week, during the parade of ships. Um, you can see all of the servicemen and women on the deck of that ship. Okay, if you were zooming in, you might not be able to recognize their faces, but they're clearly there. We also have in the background, I can see that it says MetLife on the one building. Okay, so this is an editorial image. Now, let's say that that ship wasn't there and this was kind of just a generic photo of the New York skyline in this spot. And I think even with that MetLife, because it's still a generic overall photo of the skyline, that could be submitted as commercial. But because that aircraft carrier is in there and there's people and even some of the ships in the foreground, the little, not even ships, the little boats in the foreground, if I were to zoom in, I might be able to see recognizable things on those. So for stuff like this, especially since it was an event, I'm tagging it as an editorial image anyway, because it depicts like this special event. Okay, and it's very newsworthy as well. So you want that editorial caption in there that tells people where was it, what was the date of it, all of that. Going through some more. We got a lot more wildlife going on here. Okay. This is an interesting one. These are sailboats in Raritan Bay in New Jersey. Okay. Now, I probably could have brought this image into Photoshop. I probably could have removed the names and the registration numbers from these boats, and I probably could have sold it as editorial. I'm sorry, I probably could have sold it as commercial, but I don't feel comfortable doing something like that because I can only imagine that like one of the people that owns one of these boats went online and they Googled their boat or they Googled that marina at one point and they found these pictures because they're easy to find. You know, if you're Googling these locations, my images pop up all the time and stuff with stuff like that. And they could go, hey, that's my boat. They're selling pictures of my boat. Why are they selling pictures of my boat? And then maybe they start digging around and getting annoyed. And I don't know. Editorial, you're safe. Okay. As far as I know, you're safe because you didn't try to sell pictures of their property commercially. You're selling it as just an overall beautiful view of this area of the bay, of what takes place there. So, do you see what I'm saying with that? So sometimes, even though you can do certain things, it's a matter of should you? Do you want to deal with the issues that might arise because you did something that maybe you could legally do, but maybe morally, I don't know. So you kind of have to look at it from a couple different angles. Okay, we're dealing with lots of cloud photos here. Those sell sometimes too, the cloud ones. And not a lot here that really, here's some more of the boat ones in the marina. Another one of the New York skyline of lower Manhattan. I believe I took this one from the Staten Island ferry, but very clearly, if this image did not have the Circle Line cruise ship in it, and I think, is this another? There's another like ferry type commercial boat over here. If it didn't have those in it, you could sell this image as commercial, but because those are in it, it becomes editorial. Okay, I'm going to switch over to some of my images on Adobe stock because I want to show you a few more of like what illustrative editorial images are. So, Adobe stock. As I said earlier, you are not allowed to do editorial images that have people in them. So, for instance, if I went and I took a bunch of photos at a public parade or of a city street where people were walking around, they would not accept those. Okay. They only accept ones that are like editorial images of like specific brands and things associated with those brands and whatnot. So, for instance, you'll see a lot in here with the Barbie photos that I did. Okay. Now, Barbie's actually on the restricted list. Like if you look at some of the lists of trademarked items, but it does indicate that they can be accepted as editorial. Okay. And that depends on the agency too. Certain ones won't even touch this. But I do happen to have these Barbie images on Adobe, on Shutterstock. So they are out there, but probably be just because they're done in kind of like I have them posed almost like they're like doing people stuff in their little house and everything. So I'm sure that factored into it somehow. All of my board game images are going to be, oops, are going to be illustrative editorial. Okay, so we have the Candyland ones, another of the Candyland ones, any of the Scrabble ones. Okay, this is another one that they consider illustrative editorial. This is the Stone Pony down in Asbury Park. Okay, because that's a very recognizable, famous place. So they accept those. This one right here, this is actually a picture of my pantry stocked up during the pandemic, okay? You see all sorts of brands in there from Wegmans grocery store, mostly from Wegmans grocery store, actually. At the top, there's a bag of Cape Cod potato chips. There's some Bob's Red Mill oats, some Nordic Naturals vitamins. So there's a lot going on in there, but a lot of different brands. So that is like about as illustrative editorial as you can get with all of those brands in it. But that is accepted in that manner, and people can use it editorially. Maybe they're doing a story on how people stock their pantries during the pandemic. I don't know, but this photo actually sells well. Has sold a lot actually, especially back a few years ago. Okay, here's an interesting one. Here we are dealing with these charm necklaces that were very popular in the 80s. Yes, I still have mine. I found it like back months and months ago, and I said, I need to photograph this. It has sold a couple of times, but for this, it is considered editorial. Okay, just because what do we have on here? We have a couple charms that aren't, a lot of them are generic. Okay, this whole entire thing with these charm necklaces, it's not like it was a specific company that was putting them out. It's not like trademarked or anything, but we have like a little 7 Up charm on the one. On the one that I showed you just before, it had a little Coca-Cola charm on it. So it has brands in it. So then it becomes editorial. Back to the Future car, of course, it's editorial. This was taken at a public, no ticket, no payment to enter type of public event. Trivial Pursuit pieces with the board games. Okay, there we have another illustrative editorial. The Viewmaster ones, editorial. This is an interesting one right here because we're dealing with a city street in Manhattan. Obviously, I think that this is pretty early in the morning when we were here, but there's no people in this, right? So you'd be like, oh, I don't need any releases, blah blah blah. But you can see at least one, two, three different restaurants in this image. Okay. If I let's say that I was like, I'm gonna try to get releases for this so that I could sell this commercially. Okay. I mean, there's nothing really, I don't know. I mean, if you look really close, you might see like some neon signs in the window for, I don't know, different alcohol or whatever at some of the bars. But let's say that I went to each of these establishments and I asked the owner, "Hey, could you sign a release so that I can use this image or this image commercially?" And if they signed the releases, then yeah, I could probably submit and use them as commercial images. But why would you go through all that trouble? You see what I'm saying? Like, why? Like, this makes like the perfect editorial image if someone's doing some sort of a story on like the pubs in lower Manhattan or something like that. Okay, so why would you even need that commercial? Who would use that for some sort of advertising purpose unless it was one of these restaurants? Okay, and I'm sure they have their own pictures. They don't need mine. More of the same thing. These restaurants, Princeton University, again, that's editorial. What about, okay, what about this on the boardwalk in New Jersey? Now, if you look in the background, we see like a DiMaggio jersey back here. But, oh, okay, and we see like Mickey and Minnie. So that makes it pretty easy. We see the minions. Okay, maybe this wasn't a good example, but still editorial. Now, if these machines didn't have these really well-known, you know, jerseys in them and stuffed animals and whatnot, and it looked very generic, and maybe, I don't know, it was just full of like rubber ducks or something generic and simple. Maybe you could get away with doing commercial, but this one has all of these brands in it. So we are dealing very clearly with an editorial image here. And it was taken from a public place. I'm on the boardwalk when I took this, okay? So it's like taking it from a public street. What about this one with the Lincoln Memorial? What do you think? Now, again, this is actually, did I label this? I did label this with the date and the location and everything, even though I think the date is really irrelevant because no matter when you take this picture, it is what it is. That's not changing. The location is not changing. But this one, I believe, it's not restricted. I think this is actually, I have it up here commercially, and I don't think that it's an issue um, selling that commercially. What do you think? What about this image of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge? Do you think commercial, editorial? If we were to zoom in really close, I don't think that there's anything in here that like jumps out. There's no logos across the water on any of these buildings. This is actually commercial. ADT sign, very clearly that's editorial. This is an interesting one right here. Oops, I don't know why this keeps happening. Let's try this again. Okay, let's look at this picture. This is a close up of a sneaker. I think that when we look at this, we all know what this is. But how many times have you seen like knockoffs of these like Converse All Stars and they have the same design? So the design in and of itself is not like some sort of proprietary design, or maybe it is, I don't know, but I've seen them on other sneakers before too. There's nothing in here that indicates Converse. There's no picture of the logo on the side of the sneaker or on the back heel of the sneaker or anything. And these I'm able to sell these commercially because there's nothing that actually distinguishes them as Converse sneakers. Okay, does that make sense? So I look back at them sometimes and I'm surprised, but no, they accepted them as commercial images and they sell as commercial images. Like I said, if they had had any of the markings on them, that would be a no go. They would have to be editorial. So that gives you a pretty good idea of different things that are editorial versus commercial. You can see that at times it can get kind of tricky. But if you think like anything with a brand in it, anything with a logo in it or on it, that's going to be editorial. Any street scene where there's recognizable people. it's going to be editorial. Okay. Any place where you can legally take photos, if there's people and events going on or whatever, and it's a public place, you can almost always sell them as editorial, at least in the US. I can't speak to what the laws of public photography are in other countries and other places, only here. So if you live outside of the US, you need to know all of these laws and how they pertain to the stock photos that you're taking and that you want to upload to your agencies. Okay. But I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions or comments, please ask away. I'm always open to different ideas for other episodes. And yeah, take care, and I will see you next time. Bye.